Hi there, it's Kevin with RogueDeckBuilder.com. I thought I'd show the deck that I played last F&M Spotlight. I did a deck with Erebos' Titan, and little by little, after testing it in that Friday Night Magic, then playing a few more games that Friday, I decided, little by little, it started changing into Seasons Past. Now, I think if you're in any sort of mono-black control, it's just so easy to splash for Seasons Past, as you already want the Hissing Quagmires in the deck because they feel like a Mutavault. And this card is just so good in a black control-based deck because you can actually kill a creature by activating Hissing Quagmire and blocking. It can also be used as the late-game finisher. And so that's one of the main reasons you want to go into green, is to splash a manland. And the second is that Seasons Past is just an incredible draw spell. So the other two, Nissa, Vastwood, Seer, and Nissa's Renewal, they're definitely not necessary in this build. I just kept with them just because a lot of the decks using Seasons Past, the Finkel list, was using a 2 of Nissa. I only used a 1 of, and the Renewal is actually pretty good in those grindy matchups. It allowed you to get rid of lands and then draw into more gas. So my version of this is a lot different. Now, a few of the criticisms or critiques I have about the Seasons Past deck is it is very finisher light. There are not that many ways to win the game once you have the luck going with Seasons Past and Dark Petition. They try to do it with Kalitas, Nissa, Vastwood, Seer, or just with attacking you with Hissing Quagmires. Well, this isn't a very good strategy against, like, Declaration of Stone. If one of your Kalitases gets exiled, you're pretty much done for. You have a very hard time finishing off that game. And same with Nissa. The majority of the times, Nissa does not survive. You're going to use her on turn 3, get a land value out of it. It's a Borderland Ranger that can come back with a Seasons Past, and it's just not a good game plan. So I've added a lot more finishers in this deck than what the traditional one was using. Now, let's just go down the deck tech for Seasons Past. What this tries to do is it tries to go Dark Petition into Seasons Past, and then they recur each other over and over and over. And then there's some card draw through Read the Bones and Nissa's Renewal. And the creatures in this deck are Kalitas and Nissa, which Kalitas can, with all the removal in a mono blacklist, can get out of control, get a bunch of 2/2s. If you sacrifice one of those, Kalitas becomes Languish proof because he's a 5/6. And speaking of which, Languish is the whole reason for this deck. This card preys on a lot of the aggro decks like humans. It also is very good versus Bant, and it's actually pretty good against the tokens as well. So Languish is just a premier card right now in the metagame. The other cards they use are a number of Grasp of Darknesses, Ultimate Prices, and Ruinous Paths. And a lot of them usually have a very diverse package of the 3. And then have some disruption through Transgress the Mind, Infinite Obliteration, and Duress. So that's the shell of it. Then they usually run a Deadweight as well as a 1-drop that they can get back. Now, so that's kind of the shell of the Seasons Past deck. The cards that I chose to include in my kind of version of Seasons Past are remnants left over from the Erebos' Titan deck, but they have been working phenomenally in this deck. The first one is Sinister Concoction. This card seemed to do everything that I wanted it to do in a Seasons Past deck. It gave me a 1-drop that wasn't dead late game like the Deadweight was. It also can kill any creature, just not give -2, -2. It puts a card from the top of my library into my graveyard, giving me more fuel for Seasons Past. And yeah, and then the discarding a card is actually something that I have a combo with in this deck. So usually Sinister's Concoction, even if I had to discard a card, I was pitching Kalitases all the time with Sinister Concoction, just knowing that eventually I'll get it back with Seasons Past. So it wasn't a big deal just to throw like a Kalitas or something that I wasn't, or Read the Bones or something I just wasn't ready to use quite yet, and I could just set up the Seasons Past to get them later on. Another one is this Shamble Back. Shamble Back is in here for Erebos' Titan. We'll talk about that. But this card was phenomenal all day. It gave me almost a little bit of a win condition, because I could keep recurring this with Seasons Past, because the 1-drop is very light. In the normal Seasons Past deck, there's only Deadweights. And the Shamble Back actually gave me 2 life and a zombie, while actually exiling a creature. This became a little bit relevant versus Ojutai's Command. A lot of the Bant lists are using Ojutai's Command. So one of Shamble Back is phenomenal in this deck. Now, it used to be 3, and there used to be 4 main board of Erebos' Titan, but this has been cut back to 1 of, but I still think that it plays a very, very important role in this deck. The next is Call to the Bloodline. Call to the Bloodline won me a total of 3 matches, I believe, all versus control-based decks. U-White controls, Esper controls, those sorts of decks. It also stabilized me. Yeah, this card completely stabilized me versus an Aristocrats deck that was trying to ping me down, and I was blocking their creatures every turn. I think he had, when I was pitching a bunch of cards and just stalling, I think he had 2 flipped Duskwall Recruiters. And I was able to basically negate that 3 damage and gain a life. And then hacking in with like Catacomb Sifters and Elvish Visionaries just wasn't getting the job done. I was just stabilizing each turn with pitching a card to call the Bloodline, and eventually Seasons Past just got everything back. But where this card really shines is versus control. Control, you have so many dead cards. All of these cards are so dead. Ruinous Paths aren't, but a lot of just like the Dead Weights, the Languishes, the Grasp of Darknesses. There are so many cards that you do not want to see versus control. You just pitch them to Call to the Bloodline. Call to the Bloodline is also really good for pitching like late game Transgress the Minds when there really isn't anything to get out of the hand. But Call the Bloodline along with Sinister Concoction actually work with from under the floorboards. This was my all-star all night long. This did everything I wanted to. Versus Bant and Humans, this would stabilize me with 3 life and 3 zombies. So the turn I'd usually cast is after a Languish. I've cleared the board with a Languish, but I still need to stabilize. So then I go from under to the floorboards, get 5 zombies, or excuse me, 3 zombies and 3 life. They do come into play tap, but then afterwards, that gives me a ton of either chump blocking, or they can group block, or they can actually just even turn the tides and start swinging. And that's a pretty fast clock with even 3 2/2 zombies after you've cleared the field. But where this card really shines is its black Secure the Waste. There was a number of games I was able to call the Bloodline or Sinister Concoction into an instant speed from under the floorboards with Madness. Now, with a Seasons Past deck, you're going to easily have 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 lands on the battlefield late game. And so this equates to, with 1 mana spent towards the Call the Bloodline or Sinister Concoction, this equates to like 3, 4, 5, 6 zombies at instant speed, and you get that much life. So there are so many times it's down to like 2, 3, 1, 5 life, and from under the floorboards was my key stabilization card. It seemed to work so much better than Nissa's Renewal. Nissa's Renewal I only used a couple times. You end up siding it out a ton of times versus a lot of the different matchups. But from under the floorboards was great versus midrange, great versus aggro, and great, phenomenal versus control. Now, I can't tell you how many times all my zombie tokens got Declaration Stoned, and I kind of scratched my head throughout the entire tournament that people were continuing to keep in Declaration of Stone, but it still got you the life, and the card itself does not get exiled, just the tokens. So eventually you can just start recurring it with Seasons Past. Now, the one downside with From Under the Floorboards is it's the same mana cost as Dark Petition. So Season Pass a lot of time is hard to choose a From Under the Floorboards over Dark Petition, but it still gives you that option, especially if you have another Dark Petition in your hand and you don't need to tutor up another Seasons Past again. Or if you're just so far ahead that you just need a finisher, that's when you Seasons Pass for Under the Floorboards and like a Sinister Concoction, and then you can basically guarantee. I think what's the highest? I got it off for... I think I got it from the floors off 10. Yeah, I had 13 mana on the battlefield, and I did do it for 10. There's a couple times, too, that I did it for 5, and then immediately sacrificed to Westvale Abbey. And the reason why I'm running Westvale Abbey in this deck is why not? This slot is very, very... I was not impressed with Evolving Wilds. Yeah, sure, Evolving Wilds you can get back with Seasons Past, but it just didn't... More than a one of seemed very, very bad, especially like when you need to top deck a land and you like for on your turn 4 or 5 and to cast Dark Petition or Seasons Past, and you top deck Evolving Wilds. That is the worst feeling in the entire world. So I cut down to just a one of. Speaking of other lands, Blighted Fen. This is another one that I scratched my head that wasn't included in the Finkel list. Phenomenal card. I can't even count how many Westvale Abbeys I killed with Blighted Fen after they had, or even like Avacyn's, flashed in Avacyn's, or Dragonlord Ojutai. What are some other things I killed with Blighted Fen where my opponent really, really felt Did I kill a Gideon one day? I think that because he made him indestructible, and then I made him sack it. But it's just free. Your fixing is fine. We're playing a ton of swamps and Hissing Quagmires, Llanowar Wastes, and the forests are easily. 4 forests might be even overkill in this deck. I just like having a few more options for Nissa to actually grab. But the Blighted Fen never felt that it was a phenomenal target to get back with Seasons Past. That's another removal spell at 0 that is actually a 6-mana removal spell that you can recur and kill more creatures. Alrighty, so then my last mainboarded card is Flaying Tendrils. This is a key card versus Aristocrats. Phenomenal versus Aristocrats. It's also really good versus humans, but what I like about this the most is it's perfect mana with Dark Petition on turn number 4, or turn number 5. So a lot of times the Aristocrats decks don't mind Languish as much because they're getting value out of it. They're getting Scries, they're getting damage to Zulapur Cutthroat. They're being able to protect things with, or being able to sacrifice everything to make the Nantuko Husk big. The Flaying Tendrils exiles everything. If they don't have a Nantuko Husk out, if they have Zulapur Cutthroats out, if they have the Catacomb Sifter that's trying to get Scries, they are not getting any Scries off the Flaying Tendrils. The die effect does not happen. They're exiled immediately. It also stops them from being recurred from Liliana, because there's some key cards like Zulapur Cutthroats. All you need to do versus Aristocrats is take out their Zulapur Cutthroats and their Nantuko Husks, and the deck is very, very weak after that. So Flaying Tendrils can take out those early Zulapur Cutthroats, can take out those Elvish Visionaries. They're not going to be recurring them, and it puts you so far ahead. And then Languishes can do some work as well, but this was a very, very key card against that. It's also on turn 3 against humans. It's a board wipe on turn 3. They don't have anything at that point that can survive it. Maybe if they have an Always Watching on some Night of the White Orchids or something, if they're on the play, then they can get above Flaying Tendrils, but you're still going to get some value out of the Flaying Tendrils. So onto the sideboard. Oh, then we're playing 3 Read the Bones. I thought 4 was so overkill. There are matches where you have to be very, very careful with your life total, and you didn't want to see that many Read the Bones. I think 3 was the right number. So the sideboard has some other cards that I think were very, very relevant in the ability for this deck to shine on both the FNM that I played it in and the game day. Did I mention that I won game day? I'll go through the matchups in a second. But anyway, so a lot of the sideboards that I've seen with Seasons Past have more like flex spots. So it's like more removal, more like they had some, there was like naturalizes that I thought, and clip wings, some things like that I've seen in the sideboard that I'm like, okay, that's okay. Duresses, plenty of those type of stuff seem to flood their sideboard. But I like to go bait and switch with this deck. I think it's you have to consider this a mostly creatureless deck, which is Kalitas and Traitor, or Kalitas and Nissa. So this is my bait and switch package. I bring in Erebos' Titan and the Gitrog Monster versus like controller midrange, and these cards completely destroy midrange decks. There isn't a card right now that's a 4-drop that's about on par with Erebos' Titan, and there isn't a 5-drop that's on par with Gitrog Monster. Here, Monster also works really well Seasons Past. So Erebos' Titan has a lot of text in this deck just because you're a mono black control. You're clearing your opponent's board with all of the removal package. He has indestructible. So versus Esper Control is where Erebos' Titan really shined, because my opponent like kept in ultimate prices for Kalitas and then sided out like a bunch of other removal. And Erebos' Titan just was, and he had like Ruinous Path was his other removal spell, and so he kept these in, and Erebos' Titan dodged them all. Or what's really fun with Erebos' Titan is if they have a creature and try to kill your Erebos' Titan, in response you can kill their creature, and then Erebos' Titan gets indestructible again, and yeah, so he survives. But what makes this card phenomenal is the 4 mana for 5/5. It versus like Bant, it's going to be able to be the biggest roadblock ever. They have a hard time swinging through Erebos' Titan. Most of their creatures cannot be Dromoka's command to be able to fight Erebos' Titan, because it's most of their guys are 3/3s or 2/3s or whatnot. And it's just, and the turn 4 is very, very, so it's the same turn they're going to try to collect a company. They can Reflector Mage it back, but a lot of them do side out the Reflector Mages because they see this, and these are all kind of... Kalitas is okay to Reflector Mage. Nissa is terrible to Reflector Mage. So the Reflector Mage becomes kind of a clunky 3-mana 2/3. And so they try to find more control and side out the Reflector Mages. The Gitrog Monster is just insane card advantage, and with Seasons Past, you can start chaining. You can play a lot of lands per turn. It's just, you have plenty of lands by the time you cast it, and it gives you that card advantage. Another little tech with Erebos' Titan, though, is the Shamble Back. Shamble Back says exile target creature card from your graveyard and put a 2/2 zombie into play. Erebos' Titan says whenever a creature leaves an opponent's graveyard, you may discard a card and return Erebos' Titan in your hand. So it's a way to recur your threat without Seasons Past. So again, there will be some dead cards later on, like lands or just cards like late game. The board is completely emptied and you have a Languish or a Flaying Tendrils you no longer need. You can exile one of their cards and then discard a card to bring back Erebos' Titan. I think throughout the entire duration of the tournament that only happened once, but it's still an option. Erebos' Titan can also, that discard a card after a creature leaves an opponent's graveyard, can also be used with From Under the Floorboards. But that didn't happen one time in the tournament. It was just because you'd usually like Shamble Back as well with that. But I mean, it's still an option if they have some sort of way that they're exiling their own creatures from their graveyard, or if they use like Ojutai's Command. There's another one: return a creature back from their graveyard to play, or a Deathmist Raptor. There's another perfect example of a card that is coming back from their graveyard into play. Erebos Titan can punish them for it. 2 more Transgress the Minds were in the sideboard. These came in against Aristocrats and Bant and Control. I would not be against putting 4 Transgress main board. There are very few decks that this card is dead or bad against. Humans, I take it out, but it's not dead. It can hit, Transgress can hit Always Watching. It can hit Avacyn. It can hit Archangel of Ties, whoever's still using that card in humans. But that's not enough for me to justify with Transgress. A lot of times it will miss versus those, especially if they're the 1 and 2 drop humans. But the majority of other decks Transgress. Green-White Tokens, this card is phenomenal against. This card really messes them up. Then we have an Ob Nixilis Reignited. This is my win condition versus Control that I know that are too stubborn to take out the removal. So I'll take out all my Kalitases, all my Nissas, everything. Well, I'll keep Nissa in versus Control, but take out everything. They have a bunch of dead removal, and Ob Nixilis is just going to be my win condition. And it's just going to be a very long, grindy match. That happened. And Ob Nixilis, once you get to his emblem, says whenever a player draws a card, they lose, or whenever a player draws a card, you lose 2 life. So when they draw a card, they lose a life. When you draw a card, you lose life. When you read the bones, they lose 4 life. And so there's a lot of... once you get Ob Nixilis' ultimate off, it's pretty much game. Plus the card advantage is just insane versus Control. Infinite Obliteration comes in versus decks that are very vulnerable. We're thinking World Breaker. We're also thinking I bring it in versus Bant to take out their specific cards. Usually I like to name with Bant Avacyn. I also like to name either Den Protector or Duskwatch Recruiter. Just that there are ways that they're going to get back in the game. Any sort of card advantage. And then Infinite Obliteration I also will probably bring in versus tokens. Not tokens, excuse me. Yeah, probably against tokens because you name Avacyn. But against Aristocrats because that's where he names Zulbar Cutthroat or Nantuko Husk. Infinite Obliteration could also work with Erebos' Titan because it exiles stuff from the graveyard. And so there's a creature leaving the graveyard. Last is a Complete Disregard. This is in here for Hangerback Walker. This is also in here for Zulapur Cutthroats. And I actually bring it in versus Bant because it kills stuff with power 3 or less. It's just better than Ultimate Price, which has been relegated to the sideboard now. Ultimate Price is good versus humans, and that's about it. It kills Avacyn, but so does Grasp of Darkness. I don't really know many scenarios where Grasp of Darkness is going to be worse than Ultimate Price. Ultimate Price kills the vast majority of things that you're trying to kill with Grasp of Darkness, including Avacyn. The only exception is the Archangel of Ties. I don't even care about Archangel of Ties. It's not that big of a deal with this deck. It's like most of the stuff Archangel does survive, but eventually you'll hit it with the Ruinous Path. And there's other ways. It's just I've never been too concerned. We have Sinister Concoction. That's why our list does not need Ultimate Prices too, because this is our Ultimate Price. Then we have a Remorseless Punishment. This is one of my huge secret techs for this deck. This was so good versus mid-range and Control. I recurred this. I think the most I recurred this in one game was 3 times with Seasons Past. By the 3rd time, they're dead. Remorseless Punishment. First time they'll probably take some life, maybe discard some cards. If they have a creature out, they'll sack it. But against control, I think the first time I made him take 10 life, and the second time he only had 3 cards in hand, had to discard 2 cards and take another 5 life, and then he's in really danger zone with like Hissing Quagmires. I also cast this versus. There was some sort of more mid-rangey black-green that I cast Remorseless Punishment with and sacked 2 creatures, and they're both relevant creatures. This is terrible versus like humans and aristocrats, but it's nice. It's a nice little just one of in the sideboard. It is a 5-drop again, so it's kind of awkward with Seasons Past because you usually want to get Dark Petition. Then we have Pick the Brain. This card was an absolute all-star. Delirium's not too hard to get. The creature's hard to get, but Enchantment Land Instant Sorcery is quite easy to get in the graveyard. And so Pick the Brain can get rid of any card out of their hand. Any card counterspell they're holding up, they have to counter the Pick the Brain. Or if you can slip it through, you can actually get rid of all the copies. And so this just makes it for another grindy match that Pick the Brain can actually do some work, and then your opponents can be drawing into, instead of gas, they're going to be drawing into I got Invasive Surgery with Pick the Brain once, and I think I did get a Scatter or Gideon. I got Gideon with Pick the Brain. That's right. All the Gideon's gone. So yeah, I think it's a worthwhile card in here. I like it better than Duress. Duress is just so awkward in the format. I've missed so many times with Duress. Miss versus decks that it probably shouldn't miss against, and Pick the Brain does not miss. So that's my overall deck tech for Seasons Past. I know it's like fallen out of favor with the MTGO crowd, and it did a horrible poor showing at GP Toronto. I think this is more of a complex deck that in the right hands is going to be powerful. I don't think that anyone can just pick it up. I think there's a lot of decisions making to be made, especially with your early removal. A lot of times you don't want to waste them when you have a Languish coming up, and you have to outplay your opponent, meaning your opponent that if you're going against an opponent that's not trying to overextend, like a Bant player that's just going to put out 1 threat, then you have to really use your cards wisely and use your life total as a resource. I got down against Bant to 1 life, and that was mainly because of my own decision by casting Read the Bones and activating things and whatnot. And another time I got down to 5 life against humans because I was just holding up a Languish and whatnot. But so use your life total as a resource. We have ways to gain life through Seasons or through Nissa's Renewal and from under the Floorboards, as well as life leaking Kalitas and Shamble Back. So it's there to be used, the life total. Let me know in the comment section below what you think about this deck. I highly recommend it to anybody that likes control. It's really not my playstyle with control, but I don't know. It's just a metagame call. I knew one of the top players at our store was going to be playing Bant. I knew another one was going to be playing Esper Control. I didn't want to run like a Werewolf's Brew that was going to be terrible versus both of those, or one of my other decks I've been working on that I just knew was going to be bad. So you kind of have to pick a deck based upon your top players, what you think they're going to be playing. And for me, that's Seasons Past. Seasons Past is great all night versus aristocrats, great all night versus humans. Just go through the matchups real quick. I drew against a U-White control with Gideon's, Jace, Narset, and lots of sweepers and like Silk Wrap type cards. That was an annoying match. Don't get me started about it. We'll move on from that one. And then beat humans, and then lost to actually Black-Green Aristocrats. Actually got turned forward by a Westvale Abbey. That was insane. With Zulaport Cutthroats. Sacked everything, attacked in for, it was 19 damage, perfect, and I had used a Llanowar Wastes to ping myself. And then I beat a Black-Green Aristocrats, and then I beat Esper Control. I beat humans again. I beat 2 more Black-Green Aristocrats. So 2 humans, 3 Black-Green Aristocrats total that I played against. 4, because I'm counting FNM the night before. And then Bant, I played Bant in the finals and 2-0'd Bant. Bant had a little bit of awkward draws, got stuck on 3 lands, and then it got stuck on, stuck on 2 lands for too many turns, but was still able to throw out gas, and then it got stuck on 3 lands with 2 collected companies in hand that I was able to transgress the mind out. And so, I mean, I did get a little lucky there, but I feel like this deck is very, very well positioned against Bant. Anyway, this has been Kevin with RogueDeckBuilder.com. Thanks for watching.